Today's show is brought to you by MongoDB. When you need to focus on building applications, do you want to get bogged down by your database? Definitely not. MongoDB is an intuitive, flexible document database that lets you get to building. MongoDB's document model is a natural way to represent data so you can focus on what matters. And MongoDB Atlas is the best way to use MongoDB. It's a global cloud database service that gives you all the developer productivity of MongoDB, plus the added simplicity of a fully managed database service. You can get started for free with MongoDB Atlas at mongodb.com/atlas. That's mongodb.com/atlas.
Cloudcast Media presents from the massive studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. This is the Cloudcast with Aaron Delp and Brian Gracely, bringing you the best of cloud computing from around the world.
Good morning, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome back to the Cloudcast. We are coming to you live from the massive Cloudcast studios here in Raleigh, North Carolina. It is both me and Aaron. Aaron, how are you this week?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
I'm doing well. It's March, which means here in the South that the pollen is starting to come out, and so if I sound under the weather, it is because of pollen. I do not have the coronavirus, as far as I know.
Yep. Brian left the house during pollen season.
I am. So we are now looking to be sponsored by Flonase or some other type of thing. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to do Cloud News of the Week together this week. A little bit of, we both were free, and also because actually we're recording this on Saturday, but yesterday was a pretty monumental day for the podcast. So yesterday was 9 years for the podcast.
Unbelievable. We've had more than 7 million people listen to the show, or at least the show's been listened to more than 7 million times. So I guess congratulations to us. It's a nice milestone, but man, thank you to everybody who's ever given us any of your time. It's been a wild ride, and we never could have imagined it became what it became.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing to add too is again, couldn't have done it without everyone. And another stat is that this last month, we were just talking about it before we hit record. This last month was our biggest month ever. So still continuing to grow. If you enjoy the content, please continue to share it out in the community. Share this with friends, and we'll continue to create the content as well. But yeah, super privileged to be part of this.
Yeah, and one other thing, I saw somebody ask us on Twitter earlier today. They said, what's going on with Cloudcast Basics and the other show we're going to spin off? We are getting very, very close to that. So we expect to start launching that here very, very soon. So hang tight. We'll get news on it very, very soon.
So you want to do the first article?
Yeah, let's talk about some cloud news of the week. First one I grabbed, and this is, I guess, not so much cloud, but sort of fits in this digital transformation thing that we're always talking about, and how technology, we get beyond the technology. Nationwide announced with both Ford and Toyota that they are going to offer direct insurance through the automakers that's going to be tied to kind of telemetrics that comes from the vehicle. So it's interesting in the context of, we've talked for years and years, people would do demos and they would say, well, if you're doing big data or, IoT, and you are able to collect information in a vehicle, that might, impact how your, insurance company works. Well, this is bringing all that to reality. And, it only happens now because the cars are, basically rolling laptops and collect lots of information. They have real-time links back to things. And it'll be interesting, just in general, how it'll impact, how you do things like buy auto insurance. Will you just buy it directly from the company you buy your car from? Or, how will that change the landscape of what that buying experience looks like?
Yeah, and kind of weave a few threads together on this one real quick too. So I know once upon a time, and I don't know if they ever did it because honestly I hadn't kept up with it recently, but I know once upon a time Tesla was thinking about rolling out, auto insurance to go with their cars. And so you might start to see this bundling of insurance with the cars. But I will add this as both obviously a driver of a car as well as the father of a teenage driver. I kind of am on both sides of the fence on this one. Like, for my teenager, yes, I absolutely want to know how she's doing. And I would love to know how safe she is and how safe she's driving and how fast she's going. But guess what? And this is probably a lot of us out there. I don't necessarily want the insurance company to know how fast I'm going. Right, I'm not sure. I'm not sure I would qualify for the lowest rate.
Yeah, and it's well, and I think the other part that gets really interesting in this is if you are the insurance company and you're now buying your insurance through Ford Motor, even on the back end, the insurance company's providing that information, you're diluting your brand, right? So you no longer think of yourself as a nationwide customer anymore. You think of yourself as a, Ford insurance customer. But I think it will be very interesting because we're also seeing the automotive companies, whether it's, directly or sort of through partnerships, they're getting into these things that are like, part-time rentals of cars and, I want to rent them for a day. And all those things are stuff that the insurance companies don't necessarily have a lot of experience in. So like, how do I price policies for a day? How do I know who you are? How do I, and I know some of the stuff we were doing over at MetLife, working with that incubator group, they were starting to look at those things. So we're starting to see these dots kind of connect themselves between the vehicles being more connected, things like insurance, which is a thing you have to have, and then, sort of these new business models and usage models all weaving together. So interesting stuff.
You want to move on to the next one?
Yeah. What do you got on the list?
So for the next one, we have Red Monk. Red Monk, friends of the show, without a doubt. And they've released their 2020 rankings of programming languages, and a lot of really, really interesting data in here. Brian, what was most interesting that you were able to kind of pull out of this one?
So yeah, they do a great job. They do this every year. Some variation of Java always is number one, which is always an interesting thing because it's just like we've seen things over the years, PaaS is dead and OpenStack's dead and VDI is dead. There's always a community that says, well, Java's dead. Well, it's dead, but boy, it comes back as number one every single year. So that's always a reaffirmation for that community. I thought the stuff that was interesting is, things like Python and R are really big. So that sort of plays to the, AI and ML communities. And then there's always these weird battles down a little bit lower in the rankings where it's like, is it a big deal that Rust or Kotlin or some other language moved up 3 spaces? Should everybody, rethink what they do? There's always these weird, the developer languages of like, should I throw away all my old knowledge and move everything to this new one? That's always, to me, kind of interesting. I don't know what that means if you're the number 15 or 16 one, but, it's worth looking into.
Yeah. And the other thing that kind of, I thought was kind of interesting when I was reading it was, Python was number 2. And then there's always these, well, hey, is Python really a language? Yeah. And it's like, okay, well, at this point, that's fine. We're going to call it a language. And oh, by the way, it's really big.
Yeah, it's being used a lot. So whether it's a language or something else, it's being used a lot. Next one we had on our list is kind of an interesting one. I don't know if I put this in a historical context or what are you doing context. So, a little while back, Mirantis acquired the assets of Docker, sort of the enterprise assets of Docker, basically what you would have called Docker EE. And we thought that was sort of interesting because, we'd covered Docker for a long time. The Docker technology didn't necessarily pan off as a commercial thing. But what was interesting is Mirantis did 2 things. One, they bought a little tiny company called Contena, which is only like 6 or 7 engineers. Okay, they're doubling down on Kubernetes. But what was interesting is they also said, we're going to go back and revitalize Docker Swarm, which is...
That's the one that jumped out at me.
Yeah, it's a weird thing to do because you go, okay, I'm sure there are Docker customers who liked Swarm and the ease of use and all that stuff. So it's like, hey, maybe we'll support this. But you know what? You own that whole thing. There is nobody else contributing to that. The rest of the community is asking you about Kubernetes. So you now own this weird problem of like, do you want the thing that's essentially kind of proprietary, or do you want the thing that the whole community wants that we're trying to ramp up and figure out? It puts them in a weird kind of position, especially if they're trying to talk to customers about like, am I moving you forward or am I just kind of, helping you with the old stuff you had? Kind of I don't know how to analyze that one.
Well, and don't get me wrong, I know nothing about them and the behind the scenes of the decision, but it makes me wonder. When I see something like that, I immediately go to, well, you know what? I bet you they had some decent sized customers. Yeah, and especially with the Docker EE, assets, they were like, oh yeah, we still need you to do some stuff on Swarm, and they're like, all right, you write a big enough check, we'll revive Swarm.
Right. Yeah,
that's what it felt like.
It's always how it works. It's always how it works. All right, one last one before we wrap it up. Company called Clearview, which got a lot of headlines as being the company that would go and scrape all the social media photos that were out there and then created this, I guess, really good facial recognition software that they were selling off to governments. Well, they got hacked. their customer list got hacked, and people are concerned that maybe their 3 billion photo database also may have potentially gotten hacked. So moral of the story, you don't get to keep any of your data, and even if you do keep your data, it will get hacked. So what's new?
Yeah,
What's
and
new?
this is, yeah, at least, and again, for us here in the States, we have what we call our social security numbers, and that's, our unique identity in the United States. And there's been folks out there that have said, at the end of the day, at this point, it's almost a useless number because you can pretty much guarantee it's out there somewhere on the internet.
Yep.
And guess what? Your face is probably out there.
That's
as
right.
Well now.
That's right. Well, all right, man. I'm gonna drop off. I'm gonna let you handle the interview, and looking forward to hearing your interview, talking about some mobile and edge stuff. But with that, we're gonna wrap up Cloud News of the Week. Thanks again to everybody for listening to us for the last 9 years, and hopefully going forward, you tell a friend, and we keep growing this thing together. So, with that, we're gonna wrap it up and get to Aaron's interview. Today's Cloudcast is sponsored by Datadog, a cloud-scale monitoring service that provides comprehensive visibility into cloud, hybrid, and multi-cloud environments with over 350 integrations. Datadog unifies your metrics, logs, and distributed request traces in one platform so that you can investigate and troubleshoot issues across every layer of your stack. Use Datadog's rich, customizable dashboards and algorithmic alerts to ensure redundancy across multi-cloud deployments and monitor cloud migrations in real time. Try Datadog for yourself with a free trial, and you receive a complimentary t-shirt. That 14-day trial can be found just by going to datadog.com/cloudcast. That's datadog.com/cloudcast.
And we're back. Welcome back to the show, everyone. Have a really fascinating topic for everyone today. And what we like to do again with the podcast is kind of learn from everyone in the industry. And so this is an area that I've kind of dabbled in a little bit, but I completely admit would like to learn more. And so we were able to find a fantastic guest for the show today. So with us, we have Sunay. Sunay is the founder and CTO of Mobile Edge X. And Sunay, why don't you go ahead and tell everyone a little bit about yourself? You've kind of been at this intersection of network virtualization, cloud, and edge for quite some time now.
Thanks, Aaron. And you're so right that, I've been at intersection of these technologies for almost 25 plus years now, except that, when we started, my career started back in Sun Microsystem, and we started building containers at that time. And we called them zones. They weren't called containers at that time. And, I'm talking year 2005 or so. So nobody knew where containers will reach today. Today, everyone is talking about just containers and containers orchestration. But that's kind of, what we started with. Then I went on when Sun Microsystem merged with Oracle. I didn't go with the merger and started a startup called Pluribus Network, which was in the software-defined networking space. And the prime purpose of that startup was, and the startup is still doing great ongoing, was to how do you solve the connectivity problem between containers and a lot of services, and how do you bring networking into a data center environment where networking and storage and compute all have to work together as one unit, right? So that was some of the foundations for software-defined data centers and so on and so forth. And then at somewhere along, Pluribus started doing great. They were more into from technology, trying to win sales and whatever. And then this whole cloud and edge, and especially how do you take cloud closer to users concept started coming along. And we got approached by Deutsche Telekom to and they approached us on behalf of all telecom industry, saying that, look, we have prime real estate in all the cities and everywhere, and we obviously have a lot of compute there to run just telco services, and a lot of time it's underutilized, and we can bring third-party applications there, build something like a distributed cloud. And then my expertise around both containers and networking and the intersection of that, like you said, literally became the prime reason where I ended up in this Mobile Edge X, and it's like, okay, let's try and see what we can do here. So long story, done whole bunch of things around, distributed systems, networking, cloud technologies, and stuff like that. And fun never goes out of this. So here I am.
Fantastic. And let's kind of start at the start. And I almost feel like, in the early days of our podcast, we start this podcast all about cloud computing, but then we had to start every episode with, well, what's your definition of cloud, right? And so I'm going to start it with, what's your definition of edge? Because there's some instances where we're talking about network edge devices. Sometimes we're talking about edge computing. Sometimes we're talking about other things as well. And so what's your definition of edge, and what are some of the historical problems that you have seen there?
So that's a very excellent question, right? Because a lot of time people think they know edge. Reality is, when you are running Alexa at home, or an Apple TV at home, or an Apple HomePod at home, that's an edge for your home. That's an edge device right there, right? Which is working with end users and working with your other devices, kind of doing your IoT stuff as well. And that's kind of, a space that you have Amazon and Google and kind of Apple in. We are not trying to solve that problem, right? For us, the edge starts becoming kind of something which is close to users, but not quite in their home, something that can be managed from outside, something that can be industrialized from outside, right? So what we started calling, at least for us, the edge starts becoming kind of a near edge, near the user's edge. It's close by, where you can get the performance benefits, the privacy benefits, and all those kind of things. But it's not something that the end user has to deal with himself. And typically applies to both end consumers as well as the enterprise customers. And typically it applies to applications which are a little bit more sophisticated applications, rather than just sensor management and, am I still alive? Is my sensor needs a battery change and stuff like that. So this is more around kind of, what we call immersive applications. So for us, edge starts becoming a little bit more kind of, sitting in telco infrastructure, sitting in the large enterprises data centers, where it's managed by a more sophisticated set of orchestration software, and you're deploying some of the applications, best of the breed applications there. So that's kind of, our definition of edge. And then obviously the third definition of edge starts becoming where cloud is currently sent. So they are also trying to expand their data centers and reach. So you have a continuum. You have think of continuum as, well, there's something on device, right? The device itself can be the edge, right? Then you get out and you get into like literally, it's my home, and what are the devices of the home, and what is the edge capability at the home, and this whole small stuff that you see. The next step starts becoming more interesting. Is what we call near edge or telecom edge. And then you have the public cloud, and public cloud trying to go a little bit more distributed, right? So that's kind of how we segmented the whole space. The place where most of this stuff is happening these days is kind of either in your home or near your home, especially serving enterprises, basically, right? So the space we are trying to address the near edge, and then the place Alexas of the world and Hey Google of the world are trying to address, which is the house itself. Right?
One thing when Brian and I started this podcast way back when, we're always trying to learn. But then there's always the everyone has their strengths and weaknesses. And when we've openly admitted we're not good when it comes to security, in particular as a topic, but in thinking about all of this, that immediately pops into my head of okay, when you have edge, you have a certain amount of identity management, of device management, and certainly securing that, because it kind of stretches you. Of course, when you're stretching out to something like that, well, you're stretching the security model as well. And so what are the common concerns or roadblocks when it comes to dealing with this?
No, that is an excellent question. You touched on a very interesting topic, because, Aaron, what ends up happening is as we are finding out, if you read the news every day and you see things every day, you also look at things that are getting declassified over a period of time and whatever. What you realize is that the world of technology is so complicated, right? And what you realize that securing it is almost impossible for individual users, right? And then you start also overlaying the privacy aspects of it, because the applications that we are dealing with, and I touched on this a little bit, are a lot more immersive applications, right? What does immersive mean? It's really software processing video feeds or audio feeds in real time. This is your Hey Siri, Alexa, Hey Google, all those kind of services, because, you have to process that in near real time. You got a response in near real time. And then the video services that go in there where, you're trying to do video analytics in retail store. You're trying to run robotics as a hospitality or kind of, things like that. Some of the examples I use there, two examples that come across quite a bit is if you think of Taco Bell, and it starts from Chick-fil-A and stuff like that. I was amazed. My son, we live in Silicon Valley, right? And we try to eat healthy and all that kind of stuff. And my son, who's a teenager, is really, when he wants to binge, he wants to go to Taco Bell and order really most unhealthy stuff, right?
Yes.
And the way he does that in the teenager world today, they don't want to go and talk to the person and explain again and again. So Taco Bell has started putting these smart things, kiosks in some of these Taco Bells, where it's like literally you go and customize your order, and they have like tons of customization you can do. And his comment was, "Daddy, I love this. I don't know why can't they put a camera in and just recognize it's me walking in and they know what I want. And why can't they just say, Ishan, do you want your original order again? Because he always orders the same thing and same customization, right?" And I'm thinking about it, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's exactly some of the use cases we are dealing with, where it's a video camera. You have a software that recognizes the person walking in. The software has literally got less than a second to recognize who the person is and intercept him and say, hey, so-and-so, Aaron, you just walked in. How are you doing today? What can I do for you? Would you like the same food? Would you like to customize? And so on and so forth, right? Same example you start seeing in Walmart, some of the discussions where, one of the problems, this is all public stuff, one of the problems these guys, most of the retailers face, they started introducing self-checkout and all. And it's great for a lot of people. I'm sure you and I love to use it because, you just get in, get what you want, scan it, pay it with Apple Pay, and you're out. But it gets misused a lot. A lot of time we heard about people kind of swapping labels for cheaper items and scanning that and getting away. So they are intercepting with technologies and, again, video processing for security and so on and so forth. So two things that come in these use cases, right? The that start emerging is you are processing video, and the video is processing sensitive information, right? You want to make sure that information doesn't get misused, because as a business, you are liable if that information gets misused, right? So for these businesses, what they want to do is someone to make sure that the video feeds and the processing software and what they're doing and what can be secure and can be private to them and not get stolen. At the other side of the spectrum is the software to do these kinds of things is fairly sophisticated software. So they want to bring best of the breed application, but they don't want to negotiate with the end, software developer in terms of like, hey, what are you doing with the information, right? So at MobileEdX, one of the prime problems we started realizing is that as a function of our platform, can I offer that trust to the enterprise, to the businesses, to the end users, where they can deploy the best software possible? But then also as a function of the platform, can we go and say that our platform guarantees that the data that is yours, software is processing, is going to stay where it is, is going to stay secure. The installation is going to stay secure. And we take kind of, the best of the breed software necessary to deal with a lot of the problems that you individually cannot deal with. So the name of the game, we originally started with trying to solve the latency problem, right? Because Edge is all about latency. You're doing video processing, audio processing in near real time, and you need to get the response out there. People are playing AR games and so on and so forth. And what we started doing is that, latency is important. More important part is when you are trying to go and bring software to end users in a lot of distributed environment, in a lot of heterogeneous environment, then how do you secure it? How do you make sure the data stays private? So that ends up being some of the real critical problems that we need to solve. And, in a nutshell, how do you make sure the keys are correct? How do you make sure you're using the best algorithms for security and encryption? How do you make sure you rotate the keys at the right time? How do you make sure your software is trying to detect for anomalies? So all this starts becoming very sophisticated, right? And a number of people who enjoy people like you and me who enjoy this kind of stuff is getting less and less, basically, right? I mean, the masses are, including the kids from top schools and CS departments, are more into interesting things around, how do I create new applications and how do I create new devices? And the back end of it, which is, security, distributed systems, distributed algorithms, is finding talent there is harder and harder, right? So that's one of the things we are solving as a function of the platform. How do you solve these things for the new devices, new applications, especially very video centric? Does it make sense, or am I just
no? It makes perfect sense.
Went down the deep.
Yeah, what I was going to add was, when I tend to think about this, and especially maybe at the consumer device level, I always think about like AR and VR, right? And think about gaming as kind of our primary use case. And I was actually going to ask you a little bit about that, of what are some of the other use cases, but you certainly covered that very well there. And I think this idea of using it, I'll just say a visual medium, and the identity becomes, through a visual medium, but then that immediately leads into that exact problem of, okay, the more we're doing this, and as we move more into a distributed world, we move into a wireless world, how does, that increase in bandwidth at the transport layer, in particular, like, let's say, worldwide as 5G starts to come into play, how does that play into a design principle? Is this just a bigger, faster pipe? Or is this an entirely new implementation that's going to be a heavy lift? Tell us a little bit about that as well.
So that's, again, a pretty excellent question, right? And you asked me two questions. What are the other applications? And we kind of touched on that, right? Gaming, especially AR gaming, and, some of the application guys we work with, like Niantic, who uses Harry Potter, Wizard Unite, and Pokemon Go, kind of, these are AR games. And for a lot of people who are going to listen to this podcast, they didn't understand what AR game really is. It really is your process and camera in a physical world, right? So you're seeing a physical world and you are overlaying a digital object in a physical world. So the goal is, if you're wearing AR glasses, what you see is 90% real world and 10% created world, basically, right? So think of this way: a lot of these AR gaming works in context of you and I are together, we are playing a game, and kind of we are hunting for a monster. The monster is in a physical world, but the monster is not real, basically, right? And you are shooting at the monster, I'm shooting at the monster. So the software kind of go and figure out basically who missed, who shot the monster, who should get the points for it. Also, if you are and I are kind of shooting the monster and monster is in between, you miss the monster, you might actually end up shooting the other person. So there's a lot of real-time stuff going on there. So that's kind of, if you look at an AR game, there's a lot happening. The software behind and the latency requirements are kind of very, very important, basically, right? And being able to deal with multiple users who are at a given location who might not be there permanently becomes another big part of it, right? Similarly, you have robotics where a bunch of robots are working together, 3D mapping a space, kind of working in a factory, and or working in a hotel or a restaurant, whatever, or in a dangerous situation, right? So what we call SLAM algorithms and so on and so forth. So bunch of drones working together. All those use cases have the commonality around their devices which are mobile. They are processing videos, so they need large bandwidth, and they are working as a group because the software needs to deal with them on a group. The software needs location aware. Software needs to be close to where the devices are because otherwise the devices get too cumbersome if a lot of processing are happening on the device. And also doing peer-to-peer where devices are working together doesn't work very well. So what you need is a software close by, which is managing a group of devices together, right? So now let's talk about what 5G brings to the table for these use cases, right? 5G, like I said, has a lot lower latency compared to 4G LTE. 5G obviously has a lot more bandwidth capability, right? So it's faster. It has a fatter pie. But that's not the most interesting part. What is the most interesting part that happens is that 5G required telecom world to re-architect or at least change a lot of the infrastructure behind it. So things around, where we can go and recognize who the user is, things around identity, things around location verification, things around network slicing starts becoming very interesting, right? Things where we can go and say that while you're on your phone or your AR glasses, if you're working on 5G, we can reserve a slice for your voice calls and critical 911 calls and SMS and whatever. At the same time, we can give some slices for AR gaming. There are some slices which are for mission critical applications like robotics and stuff like that. And being able to know these devices, identity of these devices, and not let it go out anywhere where it can be misused. So if you notice, I tied your two questions into a long answer, but it really is a lot more complicated than the capabilities that we see in the press, which is, 5G just brings lower latency and higher bandwidth. It really is a lot of the software API capability and the virtualization capability underneath in form of network slicing and location mapping. And the other part that comes for a software person like me who's trying to build a sophisticated system, what 5G is opening up is APIs that my software can consume and use to actually get access to a world, a very, very isolated, closed world, basically, right? So this allows me to string together a more sophisticated service, a more sophisticated platform that works end to end. I can map who the users are. I can map what they're trying to do, correlate that with the pipe they're using or the telecom provider they're using, correlate that with what's happening in the telecom network in terms of resource and capacity, and try to do something more end to end. I mean, this is, at the end of the day, kind of for someone with an engineering background like me, like a holy grail of, can I offer an end-to-end service at a global scale, which actually does something a lot more than what we are used to, which is delivering nuts and bolts and leaving the real problem on someone else. So that's kind of, where 5G becomes very attractive. And like some of these use cases are really interesting to end users, right? So that's the other nice part of this. This is kind of first time in 15 years I'm seeing a change in applications, a change in infrastructure technologies that is new. Because when did the world change? Somewhere around 2004, 2005, after we came out of the dot-com burst, we kind of assimilated what we have. And, we kind of went, obviously the processes became faster and better. onwards, the SATA buses and memory buses became faster and things like that. But if you look fundamentally, it's the same nuts and bolts that were created in 2005 and that we have been working on. We went from individual data centers to building clouds. It's the same technology, right? We went from using containers in a more industrial atmosphere, but the containers were built in 2005, and I played a role there. So this is the first time we are seeing a new change, a net new change, both in the applications that consume this technology and the need for technology itself to change, right? And my feeling is that the kind of journey we started as an industry in 2005, what resulted in a public cloud, we are starting to see the start of the same journey, which will result in something different. Now, I can bet you on it. It won't be the edge as we are trying to say today. It won't be exactly what we think it's going to be today, but I can promise you it's going to be different.
And it's funny. That's really eye-opening for me personally because, up until now, and those that remember kind of the old versions of all of this, right? You had the 3G, and then you had the kind of 4G/LTE, and like as you mentioned earlier with your kids, like I know my kids, like if they get somewhere and their phone gets slow, and they'll just kind of roll their eyes, and they're like, "Oh, I'm on 3G." Right. And it's, you get to that. And then I'm looking forward to at some point, they're like, "Oh, I'm on LTE. This is so slow." But it's more than that. And like, we haven't talked about platform as a service, nearly as much on this podcast lately. It's been a couple years since we've really dug into that. But would it safe to characterize Mobile Edge X's technology as almost like a development paths for edge devices? Is that a safe way to characterize this?
So the question one more time, Aaron, I think I didn't understand it fully.
Yeah. So what I'm wondering is, at the end of the day, is the technology there, is it basically a platform for developers to abstract away the APIs, if you will, from 5G and all of these other technologies, so that the developers aren't necessarily having to think about the under the covers, if you will, when it comes to edge devices? Does that make sense?
It totally does. And the reason I asked you to repeat that question was because literally you're reading my mind here. This might be, at least for a lot of us, not even $1 billion question. This might end up being $1 trillion question, basically, because if you look at the two worlds, right? The world of telecom, which is, offering ubiquitous connectivity, you are on all the time. And, we can debate the merits of being on all the time or not, but there is definitely a lot of positives that come from that world, basically. And then, you have the world of software development, right? Which is very code-centric, SDK-centric, device-centric, what chip I am on, what SDK I'm on, what API can I use, what programming language I can use, and all those kind of things. And these two worlds, now that I see the worlds, right, are literally like poles apart, right? The world of software development and application development is just a very fast-moving, people don't want to discuss things in abstraction. They just want to do stuff, and they want standard interfaces. They want SDKs to go with it. And they have learned things in the last 20 years that they don't want to change. At this point, software development is becoming very mature. You can't really willy-nilly change these things, right? Then on the world of telecom, the way they open up things or the API come out and dealing with the distributed system and all is just a whole different beast and very sophisticated, very complicated. Part of the reason is they're governed by a lot of country laws. They're governed by privacy laws. If telecom doesn't work, you always blame the telecom provider. So they are used to kind of, being very measured and very slow, right? So marrying the two worlds where we go and say that giving the developer something which they are used to, hiding the distributed system aspects of it from them so they can just continue working the way they do, And like you said, it's like abstraction layers in the form of SDKs and APIs that they're used to consuming. But then mapping on the other side that on a telecom infrastructure and being measured about how they go about doing things. So that's kind of, what we're building. In some sense, there's a distributed platform layer, which gives the appearance of a local infrastructure or local cloud. So from a developer standpoint, it doesn't change anything. They develop their containers, they develop their applications. They just say, oh, I want to service this kind of application, and I want to service this in Germany, I want to service this in US, I want to service this in Japan, and that kind of stuff, right? And then as part of a platform, what we do is we go and figure out where the users are, and we go and deploy their application. So what we do is kind of, provide abstractions that allow us to make Edge a runtime of, and let me define what a runtime of cloud means. You develop and deploy your application in public cloud just as we do today. And then our platform literally goes and takes it where it needs to go, manages it, deals with security, orchestration, all those kind of things, and gets you close to your end users without you needing to do anything about it, right? Which means we need to kind of marry what's on the device in the form of some of the capability we offer on each of these devices, and marry what we can get out of the telecom world, both in terms of infrastructure and APIs, and make it look seamless to people, right? So our at least effort tends to be around, how do we make sure that it's easy for developers to consume Edge without doing anything different? And then for the telecom world, it's easy for them to work with us without them doing anything different. And we provide that as part of a abstraction layer in the form of our platform and roll it out. And we've been doing this for about 2 years now. We rolled out a beta program last year, a lot of it in Europe, and then we extended it to Asia and US recently. And we are finding out that people are kind of, really loving the way we solve some of these problems, right, without putting the burden on them.
Last question. How does this relate to Seamster? Seamster seems to be an initiative that bringing together vendors and developers. And I know, with the recent cancellation of Mobile World Congress, this information is just becoming publicly available. So what can you share about Seamster?
So Seamster is if you notice the word Seamster is, these are the people who would go and stitch things together. So it is derived from that word. And what we learned that we obviously are a product company. We write a whole bunch of software to help developers, basically, and consume a lot of stuff around telecom. But we are also enabling a new world. We are enabling a bridge between the world of developers and telecom. So what ends up happening is that, there are a whole bunch of product managers, business people, and so on and so forth, people who are trying to monetize or do new things in between, not necessarily developers from both sides of the house, right? These are people who are trying to figure out for interesting applications, where can they deploy them? They are the product managers in a gaming company. They are product managers in a robotics company who are trying to go and address larger markets. And then from a telecom side of the world, obviously they benefit because a lot of time our edge system runs in the telecom side of the house or enterprise side of the house. So both enterprise and telecom side of the house, they kind of, are trying to make sure these applications can come into their world so they can benefit from it or they can monetize it, and so on and so forth. So these are the guys who are also trying to learn and figure out how the world works, how the world of cloud works. So Seamster in our, we have two initiatives, right? We sit in Linux Foundation and we work a lot of code and APIs and open source. And that's really for developers and people who are hand-on coders and so on and so forth. But then there is, like I said, a whole bunch of product management, business people, salespeople who are trying to enable a new world, who are trying to monetize a new world. And today they don't have a place to go. They can sit in some of these developer meetings and developer communities, but there the discussion is really about, hey, where is your Git pull request? Why didn't you approve my pull request? Why didn't you do this API properly? Why didn't you do this code properly? Can you fix this? Where's the test suite for this? And it's a really, really very coding centric communities basically, right? So for these other set of people, there's no community, right, that tries to bring together what are the use cases we are trying to address, what are the issues we're trying to address, what are the new monetization schemes we are trying to address. How does this ecosystem work? So Seamster is our attempt to bring these communities together. If you are a coder, you're writing code, you belong in our Linux Foundation community. If you're actually trying to figure out how to make this thing work in a real world, how to monetize it, how to get deployed and all that, you belong in the Seamster community, right? So that's kind of, what we are trying to enable, where we give these guys information, we help people share information with each other, and we kind of curate some of these use cases and information for both our telecom friends and our enterprise developers and enterprise owners who want to use this. Does it make sense? Or
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. And Sunay, thank you for that. We're about out of time, so what I'd like to do is kind of wrap up from here. What we'll do is we'll put some links in the show notes to all of this information. But where can everyone find out more about you? Meet you at an event or follow what the company is doing as well.
So generally, we are at mobileagex.com. We are updating we are kind of doing our, around Mobile World Congress, we do a 2.0 release or a major release. So the web pages and all are going to reflect what 2.0 release is, Edge Cloud 2.0 releases, and information related to that in the technology and product sections on mobileagex.com. And then generally, we are in most of the conferences, Game Developer Conference, Linux Foundation conferences, and things around Mobile World Congress. And the easiest way to get hold of me is on LinkedIn. We try to be pretty active on LinkedIn in terms of posting information, in terms of discussing, commenting, and Twitter is the other way to access us. And then most people know, you can reach me, Sunay, at anything you want, Google, Gmail, MobileAjax, and whatever. It should be straightforward to get to me.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for your time today. And on behalf of Brian, who wasn't able to make it this week, thank you to everyone for listening, and we'll talk to everyone next week.
Thank you for listening to The Cloudcast. Please visit thecloudcast.net to find more shows, show notes, videos, and everything social media.